Welcome to the Muñiz Legal Podcast, From Injury to Inheritance.
Hey everyone, welcome into an all-new episode of the Muñiz Legal Podcast, From Injury to Inheritance, with attorney Lizzette Muñiz, the founder of Muñiz Legal. I am your host, Mike Leon. You know Lizzette, she's born in Manhattan, raised in the Bronx, and now serving clients all across not only New York City, but the Hudson Valley. She's a bilingual Spanish-speaking attorney who's been helping individuals and families pursue compensation after serious accidents and protect their future. Today's episode, we're going to be breaking down what actually makes a personal injury case successful. Lizzette, it's good to see you. I'm interested in this. Happy New Year to you and yours. So I assume, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that people often assume that if they're hurt, they automatically have a case. Is that true?
It is not true, Mike. Thanks for having me, first of all, and Happy New Year. And a shout out to my people in Brooklyn, because I also lived there for the past 20 years. But yeah, I get that call all the time where people, I was injured in an accident. What's my case worth? Do I have a case? I know I have a case. And no, just because you were injured in an accident does not mean that you have a case. There are two parts to proving a personal injury case in New York. One part is liability and the other is damages. Liability is whose fault was it? And then damages is, were you injured enough to be able to be successful in a personal injury case in New York?
So Lizzette, let's start with the liability because you just mentioned it. What does that actually mean in a personal injury case?
The first part of any personal injury case in New York is the liability. Liability means who was at fault for the accident. So in order to find out if you even stand a chance on being successful in a personal injury case in New York, we need to find somebody other than you who was at fault for the accident.
Right. Of somebody other than you. I love it. So why is proving liability sometimes harder than people expect?
Yeah, sometimes proving liability is harder than people expect because maybe the police report doesn't read the way the accident actually happened. There are different versions of the story. Maybe evidence was not captured and is no longer available. Maybe witnesses are not available, or they were available at the time, but now no longer want to cooperate. So proving liability is not always a slam dunk.
And what about damages? What does that include? Ballpark it for us.
Yeah, so damages are your injuries. So that's what we call it in the legal world, your damages. So just because you were in an accident doesn't necessarily mean that you have a personal injury case. You have to have been injured as a result of the negligence of someone else. It has to be someone else's fault that you got injured. And in New York, we have a threshold, or there's a certain limit that you have to reach in order to prove that you were injured seriously enough to be able to collect money for your pain and suffering.
Can you kind of expand a little bit on that serious injury threshold? Like what does that actually entail?
Yeah. So in New York, there is, like you said, a serious injury threshold. If you don't meet that threshold, then you don't get to collect for your pain and suffering. So some things that automatically qualify as a serious injury in New York are a fracture, loss of a limb, loss of a fetus, death, obviously. And then there are a couple of gray areas that you could possibly prove that you had a serious injury, such as if you had a significant loss of a body organ or function, if you had permanent loss of a body organ or function, and then finally, if you were out of work 90 out of the first 180 days following the accident, then you could reach the serious injury threshold.
Lizzette, let me ask you, when people come to you with these cases, how do you determine like the value of their case?
That's a great question, and it's on everyone's minds the minute they get into an accident. So, what's the value of my case? The answer usually in the beginning is, I don't know, because there are so many factors that are involved in determining the value of the case, right? We have to assess liability. We have to see how the other side is assessing liability. We have to see what type of evidence we have to assess liability. Then we have to find out what is the extent of your injuries, which aren't always apparent right away. Sometimes you have to have MRIs and treatment. We need to know, are you going to have a surgery? And then once some time has passed and we've collected that information, then we have to see what have other similar cases settled for. Kind of like when you're selling a house, you get comps. Well, with a personal injury case, it's very similar. You have to get comps. But it doesn't end there, because just because your case might be worth a certain amount of money doesn't mean that there is enough insurance to cover that amount, right? So unfortunately, there are cases that may be worth a $500,000, but the person who hit you, if it was a car accident, only had a $25,000 policy and had no assets. Well, guess what? In a case like that, your $500,000 case just became worth $25,000.
So let me stay on that for a second. Have you seen, I'm sure you have, two cases with like similar accidents, but they have very different values? And why was that the case?
Sometimes the case where two exact fact patterns have very different values. And sometimes it has to do with policy limits for sure. But other times it also has to do with the carrier's business, I guess their business plan or the way they do business. So some insurance companies want to just get rid of the case and they're willing to settle for a reasonable amount and you can get rid of it. Some insurance companies like to tighten their belts and say, no, that's not our business plan. What we do is we fight to the very end until you have a jury in the box, and then we're going to lowball you and you're going to take it because that's just what we do. So, there's also kind of that, what carrier are you dealing with and what is their current position in the market when it comes to settling cases?
A moment ago, you're talking about medical treatment and stuff like that. Like, what role does that play in proving, a case is successful or not?
Well, medical treatment is critical in proving serious injury in a personal injury case, specifically car accidents. In slip and falls, there's no serious injury threshold. Serious injury threshold only applies to car accidents. So, if you have what's called a delay in treatment or a significant gap in treatment, that could negatively affect your ability to collect on a personal injury case. If for some reason you can't have the necessary diagnostic test to show that you've had some sort of soft tissue internal injury, so if you're pregnant and can't have an MRI, and we can't get that objective finding that you had a serious injury, that could also affect our ability to collect on a serious injury threshold. Also, if you don't treat long enough or frequently enough, then you're basically giving ammunition to the other side to say, well, it must have not been that serious if you only treated once a week for 2 months. So these are things that your attorney can work with you to make sure that you're getting the appropriate amount of treatment, and that you don't fall into some of those traps.
Yeah. Speaking of traps, I'm sure you've seen people post on social media and you're like, why'd you do that? So, what are some mistakes that you've seen often the people that are hurt make in some of these, let's say they're strong personal injury cases?
Yeah. Okay. So I love this question because one story comes to mind, which is, first of all, I want you to know that everything you post on social media is fair game and they will get access to it. They will look for it. And if you think you can take it down and they won't find it, you're also wrong, because if you litigate the case, things are going to have to be disclosed. They're going to find it. Okay. That being said, the story that comes to mind where somebody did serious damage to their case because they were posting on social media is the one where they went into the deposition and said, I can't wear high heels anymore. I can't stand for long periods of time. I can't sit for long periods of time. And someone else, not them, someone else took a video of them at a wedding dancing in high heels. And the defense found it, right? Nightmare. That's a total nightmare. So don't post things online regarding your case. Don't post things doing things that someone who's injured in an accident should not be doing. And if you do post something, don't just pull it down, because that also doesn't look too good. Talk to your lawyer and come up with a good strategy.
That's right. That Cupid shuffle doesn't need to be recorded anyway. All right, Lizzette, as we put a bow here on this episode, somebody that's listening to this right now, what would you want their biggest takeaway to be if they've been injured recently in an accident?
Yeah. The biggest takeaway is, if you've been injured in an accident, talk to a lawyer. Personal injury attorneys, we do free consultations. We want you to be successful in your case. We are only successful if you are successful. So if we take on your case, we want you to get the most possible, because that's how we get paid. We don't get paid unless you do. So consult a lawyer, consult and find the lawyer that fits with you. And also, don't be blinded by the shiny bells and whistles. The guy who tells you on day one, I'm going to get you $1 million, because there's no way on day one that any attorney can tell you the value of your case. An honest attorney is going to tell you that you need to wait until we assess liability and we assess damages, and then they're going to give you an honest answer about what your case is worth.
That's right. Those billboards are just to trap you in, folks. All right, Lizzette, thank you so much for the time, the insights, explaining all this to the audience. I appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
That wraps up today's episode of the Muñiz Legal Podcast, From Injury to Inheritance. Look, I'm going to sound like the billboards. If you've been injured in an accident, you want to understand whether you have an injury case here, do me a favor, visit Lizzette at muñizlegal.com, MUNIZ legal.com. You're going to find all the resources in English y en español, designed to guide you through the difficult moments and help you make informed decisions. Thank you again for listening. But before you go, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, leave a review and comment, or share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. As always, I'm Mike Leon. See everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.